Yeah, so here in this video we'll understand about the worm propagation models. So in that, first one is simple epidemic model. So simple epidemic model is used to study the spread of infectious diseases among humans, is an appropriate starting point. So this model, by default, it assumes that there are only two types of entities in the population. One is nothing but the individual is affected, or he is suspectable. That means he might be infected or he might not be infected. So infected person is the person who is already infected, that is the confirmed case. Suspectable is not the confirmed case, just the suspect, he might or might not have, like that. Okay, so one more thing is, if for the infected person, once infected, a person remain infected and does not recover. So these are the basic understanding which this model speaks about. So there is an equation, let n be the size of the total population. Okay, let I of t be the number of infected individuals at time t. The number of suspectable at time t is given by n minus I of t, n minus I of t, where n is the total size. So out of the, if n is the total size and if I of t is the number of infected individuals, then obviously the number of suspected people will be the total minus I of t. So that is n minus I of t. Beta is the initial infection rate, that is each infected person attempts to pass on the infection to beta suspectable in one time unit. The following differential equation, the equations what you can see below, it captures the number of infected persons at time t. So this differential equation, which okay, the 19.1 or 19.2. so these equations speaks about it. In an infinite population, each infected persons infects beta dt. Yeah, they are explaining you the second equation here. Okay, so here we have understood the first equation, here we are understanding the second equation. So in an infinite population, each infected population infects beta dt suspectables in time interval dt. However, in a finite population of size n, the probability that the target of an infective is already infected is I of t by n. Such targets do not add to the population of newly infected. So the factor, this particular factor 1 minus I of t by n in the above equation ensures that only previous uninfected entities are added to the count of the freshly infected in time interval dt. So integrating both sides, we get the equation 19.3. Now this is about the simple epidemic model. Next one is Kermack-McKendrick model. So Kermack-McKendrick KM model more accurately models the spread of human infectious diseases by considering 3 instead of 2 categories of people. So in the initial model we have understood two things. One is suspectable, one is infected. So here 3 assumptions are there. One is S, state S. So these are the people who are suspectable. I are the people who are infectious. Then T means there may be two things, that is those who are neither, that is individuals who are cured or those who are succumbed to disease, means they have they are affected by the disease or might be killed by the disease, like that. Okay, so 3 things here you need to know. So initially all the individuals in the populations are suspectable, so that S whatever you can see here, initially that is the state which is taken here. It is possible to go from state S to I but not vice versa. Yeah, state suspectable to confirmed case, that is infected case, is possible, but we cannot go reverse. So that is what they are telling. Okay, so that's what we can see in these 3 models. So first one is the SEM model. So here just the people are suspected and when they get the infection they are infected. So here once it is infected, you are getting a patch done, installing a patch done, and that takes to the terminal. Okay, the terminal, it can be cleared or might be affected, permanently affected or dead. Okay, So here they are comparing humans with the computer, so that we can understand the concepts better. See, whatever they are telling as for the humans, the same thing you need to put it in another words for the computer, that's all. Okay, so this is this Kermack McKendrick model, and this is the real model, where it's like, it's not only one patch, you need to install various patches for various problems. So here let us understand the equation. As before, I of t be the number of infectious machines at time t. Then let n be the total number of machines, and let beta be the infection rate. Let s of t be the number of suspectable. So the number of machines in the terminal state is no minus s of t minus I of t. So these are the equations. So whatever you can see, these are the equations. So there are some problems with these two worm propagation models. One thing is, machines that are suspectable but not infectious may also be patched. Then the infection rate beta is network dependent. Next, on the KM model, that is at your second model, it assumes that the rate of transitioning from the infectious to the terminal state is constant. Okay. Next one is topological worms. So in the topological worms, we will understand about the email worms. So these worms basically spread through an email. So that is what they are telling here. Okay. So these email worms, basically whenever we click on an attachment on an email, it basically creates a copy and sends a copy to the list, to the receivers list. So that is how we get whenever we receive an email sometimes, so we get a worm or a virus through that email, because we are the receivers and worms are attached to that email which is sent by the sender, which the sender is affected in this case. So one example they are telling of Melissa. Melissa was a macro worm or macro virus that propagated by sending copies of itself to the first 50 persons in the victim's address book. So all these 50 persons got that worm. One more worm is Sobig. So it was basically spreading by communicating malicious email or copying itself to an open network share. There were actually various versions of Sobig were also there. So in one more version, the Sobig could update itself by downloading code from certain websites. So it used to do that by the URLs of the sites, using the URLs of the sites which were contained in a file that itself was downloadable from the site. So this particular site, that is geocytics.com, allows user to host their own free web pages, besides providing tools in support of building dynamic web pages. Some of the malicious code received installed a keystroke logger and stole passwords from its victims. So all these things different worms were doing, email worms. Next is P2P worms. It's also called as peer-to-peer worm. So one peer may be one particular PC and another peer may be another PC. A P2P network is massively distributed system of computers where each peer or node plays the role of both client and the server. So basically we transfer different kinds of data like songs, videos and all between the between two peers. Okay, so when that is the normal file sharing happens between the two peers. And so that's what users do not download files from a central server but from their peers located across the globe. And this peers also maintains itself a shared folder of files that is willing to share with others. So they are immensely popular, as evidenced by the fact that a very large population of traffic internet is comprised of P2P packets. So let us see how it operates. To see how P2P worm spreads, it is important to understand how a P2P network operates. So let us understand the operation of P2P network. So here you understand two peers are said to be neighbors at any given point of time if there is an active TCP connection between them. So there should be a active TCP connection, one thing, a peer. So this is the one computer or one peer that wishes to obtain the file, say ABC. ABC is the name of the file, and it creates a request, query request. Okay, so this is the basically basically this particular peer A, it creates a query request message for ABC. Okay, so it asks, basically query request message means it asks with the another peer, maybe the server, okay, for this particular file, which it sends to all its neighbors. Each neighbor that does not have the file in turn queries its neighbors and so on. The peer who has ABC, it returns a query hit message. Whoever has that file, he will basically hit this message. This message traces the path of the query request message in reverse. The requesting node may receive multiple positive responses. It chooses one of them and directly contacts to that IP address. The file is then downloaded using FTP or HTTP. Okay. So here this diagram simply shows there are various peers, student, and there are three types of hops basically between the requester and the responder. So first hop is the first line, that is Q1. Okay, that is the dark line. That is the dark line. So it first contacts with these people. Okay, this is the first level of hop. Q1 is the first level of hop. Okay, once if the file is found, then if whatever if it wants, basically if it gets, then it will not go for Q2. If it doesn't get, then it will go for the second line, so that is Q2. So you can see here from Q1 it is calling to all its neighbors, so that is Q2, second hop. Even if it doesn't get, then it will go to Q3, that is the third level hop. Okay, so it will, so this basically various it depends on the network, various hops will be there. So this is how it queries, that's all, as simple as that, queries till it finds the responder. It will go on querying, that's all. So in this diagram they have shown you the third level querying. In some diagram, in some cases there may he may get the responder in one level itself. In one more there may be various levels. Okay, so let us see how does in P2P this thing network, how does the worms spread. So one of the simplest is for a malicious peer to respond positively to any query. Okay, so what does malicious peers do? Even if it is not having the file, it will query that it has the file, and it might send some file which is a worm. So that is what it is doing. Okay, so that's what they are telling there. If the requester then chooses to download the file from the malicious peer, the latter sends it an infected file whose name is changed to match that of the requested file. The infected file contains a worm which passes on the infection to the requester. Once infected, the requester mimics the behavior of the malicious peer, thus helping to propagate the infection. So that's what it does, students. It if any peer is infected, basically, then that peer whenever the requester is asking for any file, the affected or malicious peer will respond to it. Then once it responds, it basically sends the malicious code by mimicking the file name. That means what? It will, whichever the requester is asking, which file name the requester is asking, that same file name it will also give. Which this guy malicious peer will give the same file name. That is nothing but it will simply replace the file name. That's all. It will simply replace its malicious code's file name with the file name of the responder. So that is what it will do, and it will affect the requester. then once the requester becomes affected, he will again do the same with other peers. So that is how the infection spreads in P2P through P2P worms in P2P network. Next one is peers in a given P2P network may run the same P2P protocol. That is, there are usually few various implementation of this protocol leading to little software diversity. Exploitable buffer overflow vulnerability is one popular implementation. In one popular implementation is a familiar starting point. So here the starting point is the buffer overflow vulnerability. So this coupled, that means this along with the fact that the peer maintains a list of neighbors, implies that a worm has ready targets and does not need to perform random scanning as in the case of internet scanning worms. So students, each peer maintains its list of neighbors, and that list, because of that list, it becomes very easy for the worm to spread to other peers. And here to find the other peers, the random scanning is not required. That's what they are telling. The first type of worm is said to be passive, since it propagates only when requested to download a file. Second type of worm is active, since it propagates on its own without receiving requests from its peers. So two types of worms are there here: passive worms and active worms. So passive worms only spreads when it is requested, and active worms spreads by itself. So next one is the web worms. Okay, and we are also studying one case study along with it. Web worms differ from malware, such as the internet scanning worms, in several ways. Many web worms are executed in browsers which run on diverse hardware or OS platforms. Web worms are written in a high level language, making it easy to perform complex operations but difficult to execute low level operations. On the other hand, many other worms are written in assembly language. So you have to observe, students, here web worms are written in high language and other worms are written in the assembly language. So one type of web worm is XSS worm. So this particular worm we are going to study now in a case study. So why do we call it as XSS worm? Because it exploits cross-site scripting vulnerability in the web servers. So let us understand this thing, what it is doing. So first step in creating an XSS worm is to inject attack code. Inject attack code means putting the attack code into a vulnerable web server. When a user accesses the infected website through his or her web browser, the malicious code is downloaded on the browser. So malicious code will be present in the server by injecting, because this worm, XSS worm, injects its worm code into the server, and through this it will be there in the server. So website gets affected, and through website it goes to the another browser. As in any XSS vulnerability, my malicious code executes on the browser. It executes on the browser. So given that a key function of the worm is to propagate, that means to spread, the challenging question here is, how does an XSS worm propagate? The partial answer to this question may be found through our next case study. So let us understand the case study, and we will understand, or we'll get the answer for the question, how does an XSS worm propagate? So let us understand the case study first. So this worm, it's also known as SAMI. It was unleashed in October 2005 and authored by Sami Kamkar. So this guy is the creator of that worm. It is told like that. It infected the social networking site MySpace. So it targeted MySpace site, which is a social networking site like our social networking site Facebook these days. So social networking sites typically allows users to create and edit their profiles. So you know, students, I need not tell about this. Okay, so which are stored on the site and are accessible to other members of the social networking group. A user profile may contain information about him, including his hobby, photographs, etc. Sami added a bunch of carefully crafted JavaScript to his profile. So this is basically he's adding a worm code. Okay, this JavaScript code is basically a worm code. So when a visitor to Sami's website, say V1, downloaded Sami's profile on his browser, the JavaScript in Sami's profile executed. This caused Sami to be added as a friend in V1's profile, and also to include the message but most of all, Sammy is my hero. So this message was whenever they were downloading this virus, that Sammy automatically became a friend in the basically in the profile of the person who got attacked. That is, in this case, V1 is an example, and in his profile this message would come, Sammy is my hero. So using this, that is within 20 hours, using that, he had been added as a friend to more than 1 million user profiles, students. So you can understand here what is the speed. Okay, it's spread in it spread like anything. Okay, it is much faster than, it spread much faster than code red, which we had studied before. Okay, and that code red was told to be a dangerous worm, but this XSS worm is much more dangerous than that, because it spread like anything, much faster than that, faster than code red. Okay, so how did the worm spread and why did it spread so fast? So the malicious, so answer for that is the malicious JavaScript uploaded itself on the V1's profile on the MySpace server, thus infecting it. So it did this by an HTTP post request which is sent from the browser to the server. However, that would cause the screen to freeze between sending and requesting and receiving the request and receiving the HTTP response from the server. To ensure that the viewer had a normal screen experience, Sammy's JavaScript created an XML HTTP request object which was used to send the malicious JavaScript to the MySpace server. Unlike the regular HTTP request, the message from an XML HTTP request object is asynchronous and it runs in the background. So this is about the XSS worm case study, students. So in our next video, let us understand about the firewalls and its characteristics.